Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brendan with EVOQ Bike, back with a new podcast for you with special guest, Ted King. This was awesome. Caught up with Ted on some roadie stuff before we got into gravel. And Ted was actually, when he was on the Cervelo test team, came back to do Green Mountain Stage Race. It was my first Cat 1 road race. So I was like, whoa, it's Ted King. And then got to race against him at Land Run and didn't even realize it was him because he was quite mountainous with a big beard. But we get into everything talking about his trajectory and evolution of going from early roadie ranks all the way to gravel in today's world. His cognition of retirement during his last road season and kind of how he got to experience everything with that viewpoint. Ted gets a little philosophical, goes on a couple tangents, which was awesome. We talk about grand tours and one-day classics, tire size. I've been overinflating my tires. And Ted throws me back into 2012, Unbound gravel, a little bit about his family, and a couple more tangents. And then we're going to have the second episode a few days later, just trying to break these into more digestible pieces rather than a full-on hour. So hope you enjoy this one. Ted, thanks again. This was incredible. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for doing this, man.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, this is awesome. So we kind of started putting content out and making videos, and the next iteration of that just became like, hey, we should reach out to people who are way better at this than us and see if they want to talk about some of this stuff and share their kind of process. We got into gravel a couple years ago, the traditional roadies, like, oh, I guess we're doing gravel now. And so cross paths with you a few times. You seem super active on social media and just a really nice guy, to be honest with you. So I'm like, I'm going to hit up Ted. There you go. I'm going to hit up Ted King. And you were like, yeah, let's do this. And he was like, he said, yeah. I was like, yeah, he didn't really ask me any questions. So
I do a tiny bit of vetting. I make sure you have more than like 8 followers.
Okay.
But yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The timing, man, your timing was good because I've said no to a lot of podcasts lately. It's just been a crazy busy period of time. I'm like, reach out to me in like 6 months and maybe I'll have some time. So it's worked out well.
Well, man, I appreciate it. You actually were, when you were on Cervelo test team, I maybe mentioned this in the first message. I heard you were coming back to Green Mountain and I was dying to get my Cat 1 so I could just be in that race. Cause it's like, Green Mountain for anyone up in Northeast. I was pretty new to cycling and one Chris Thader, like, as a 2, so a couple weeks before, I was just harassing the guy. I'm like, please just let me get my Cat 1. He's like, dude, you clearly want this, go do it. Yeah. And it was really awesome to see. I was so new. I didn't really know what your level of cycling was, but it was just how you positioned yourself, how you raced, how much everybody looked up to you. It was a really cool thing to see. And then crossing paths with you years later in gravel, I did Land Run. Nice. And unfortunately, I crashed out with maybe like 20 miles to go. And someone was like, so how was the race going? I'm like, yeah, dude, there were 5 of us. It was me, this guy from, I forget what jersey he had on. I was like, Pace McElvin, and some like really like mountain looking guy. I'm like, oh, dude, that was Ted King. And I was like, oh, damn, dude.
Did you crash in that gnarly, muddy, like the one
downhill,
crazy section?
The one guy went down and I knew that was my first gravel race. And the guy, I didn't realize, like, leave room between you in case somebody goes down.
Yeah.
And so I endoed over him and the crash wasn't that bad. I literally chucked the bike though, probably 20 feet and broke it. So I went to get on it and I was kind of like my sunglasses were way far back and I'm like, ooh, that's kind of weird. And I picked up the bike and the fork like fell out and I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to ride this bad boy back. But it was a good learning experience and what are you going to do? So
yeah.
Well, dude,
crazy. Well,
we'll
very good to make your acquaintance again.
Yeah, you as well. We'll get into gravel, but really me as a roadie, if we can jump way back, and really kind of talking about some of the whys or like your mindset of this process of, if I'm correct, you started racing in 2002 and then raced with Louis Garneau for a couple years and then made the jump to Priority Health where you're now a pro. And kind of what was when you started riding before you made it pro, like what was your mindset? Where were you trying to take this thing? Were you just like, hey, I like bike racing, I'm just trying to get better? Or were you like, I'm going to the world tour, this is my ambition?
No, I I grew up in New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good small town living, like to get to your friend's house, to get to school occasionally. We lived a mile away from school. Weekends, you just bomb around on a bike. But then there was a big separation. That probably wrapped up when you're 10, 12 years old. And I didn't really ride much through high school. I would bring the 2002 back to about probably the year 2000 is when I was really getting back into it. And that was thanks to my brother. I have an older brother. He's 3 years my senior. He went to a prep school for high school and got into cycling there. And then he took that to collegiate cycling and had a great deal of success. I got into cycling as a result of being, the adopter of his hand-me-down stuff. I'd been a 3 varsity sport athlete through high school and then got to college and I'm like, well, what am I going to do athletically? And just picked up cycling that way. And it was a combination of just really loving the sport and loving riding and being active and finding something new in combination with having an older brother to chase and sort of have hand-me-down, not just the hardware, but also the training techniques and coaching advice and stuff like that. So I was certainly not hell-bent on world tour or whatever it was called at that point. It was more, I like racing. I'm having fun. I like being competitive. Sure, every once in a while, if I'm going to, as you start dabbling in Cat 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, winning is more fun than being pack fodder and finishing last. And I was having success. So it was a constant evolution and constant progress to get through those ranks.
What do you think, is there anything that sticks out that you learned maybe from your brother or from as you're making the jump through the categories that you still look back on that sort of helped you get to the next level? Like, we're all trying to accumulate this information, but were there any like gems that stick out to you that are like, oh man, I still remember when so-and-so told me that, and that's still true today racing gravel?
I mean, especially in hindsight, it's not like this great nugget that's going to take you guys all to the next level. It's embrace the moment. I feel like every aspect of cycling, and this can then translate to life as well, we're always thinking about the next thing. So if you are at your first day of training camp, you're looking forward to the final day. If you're on your stage 1 of a stage race, you're already like, oh man, stage 6 looks really hard. I got to be ready for stage 6. If you have a 20-minute power effort, a 20-minute interval on minute 1, you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for minute 20 to be over. So like embrace the moment, no matter where you are. And that I think was something that really took me through those early years of cycling. Especially being able to say this now in hindsight. I mean, who knows how much I was doing it at the time, but really just appreciate where you are, what you're doing, appreciate the interval, appreciate the day, appreciate the moment you're on the bike.
I was going to ask you, do you think you always had that? Or I had read an article where once you knew you were retiring, you said the timing is amazing because now I get to look back on all these firsts, my first training camp, my first tour, and like as I go through this last season, I'm really going to be able to soak that in. Do you think that knowing that you were going to leave instilled this now? Or have you always just been like, I'm here today, I'm living, I'm soaking this up? Because that's like a pretty like, I don't want to say like deep,
I mean, it's heady
like,
stuff. It's philosophical. My father, he suffered a stroke 18 years ago, and that was a transformative part of my life. I was just getting into college. I was in college at the time. I was getting into cycling at the time. He was just a pillar of our family and really successful in his job and someone I really looked up to. He's alive and every day presents its challenges. I mean, having a brain injury is really, really difficult. It makes every day hard. I think from that, especially over these 18 years, I've come to appreciate just like that moment. You don't know when something's going to be torn from you. You don't know where life is going to steer you. I mean, my father, he was a healthy, happy person. No one would anticipate having this like the rug yanked out from under him. So it's probably not something that I was thinking as a 19-year-old. I'm like, I need to appreciate this moment, but it's something that's definitely really been distilled over these years.
Yeah, that's okay. That it gets deep very quickly. I see what you mean.
Oh yeah.
What's what do you remember back from those days? Then once you hit, I mean, maybe there's not really between Pro Conti and then you go World Tour, you're riding with the best in the world, you know, you're at the top of the game. What was some of that like process like that, you know, kind of the same question, but just what were you learning from you're riding with Peter Sagan, you're riding against people that you probably maybe had looked up to years before. I mean, it's such a quick rise. What do you think? Do you think it was you just soak stuff up from watching some of these guys as you become teammates, or were there like mentors to you in the game that were like really helping you along and things that kind of helped you feel like in those early years, like, okay, I belong here, like, and things you just learned?
So kind of hinging on my last answer, it was an appreciation of where you are and moving through the ranks. So when I was a collegiate racer, I wanted to do well at collegiate racing, but only a portion of me said, okay, I want to go pro. And then I went pro domestically and raced 3 years domestically. And basically it's a series of doors opening. So in those 3 years, I had really no anticipation of going to Europe until 2008. I had a really good season. I was the top ranked American in the NRC, as it was called then, the North American Racing Calendar. And that opened up the opportunity to go to Europe. You know, when you get into cycling at the age of 19, you don't, maybe circumstantially to me, maybe this could happen these days, but I mean, I feel like cycling is so acute now. You need to be a world-class sprinter or world-class hill climb specialist or time trial specialist. You don't need to, but these are things that we're seeing more and more of, whereas you don't see these like Johnny come lately domestiques, which is basically how I would describe myself when I first entered the World Tour. You know, I mean, when I'm 19 years old, I'm just getting into cycling. Fast forward, I don't know what, 10 years, I'm teammates with Mate Mahoric, who's a 2-time world champion at the age of 19. I'm like, dude, I didn't even have a bike then.
Yeah.
So, you know, I quickly found and fell in love with the sport of cycling. So yeah, you're watching all the races, you're paying attention to the who's. Yeah, I remember being on my first Paris-Nice and racing against Valverde, who at the time, it was kind of sort of comical. At the time, he was in a little bit of scrutiny with doping, and then after the race, he had to serve a ban. It was just my laughing point, not funny at the time, it was just how hard he made the race for us. And then there, fast forward a month or so, he's being banned. I remember racing against Peter. It was, I think, also Paris-Nice. He won a stage. He was second on 2 stages and basically podiumed every single stage. At that point, he was a 20-year-old. Thankfully, in the subsequent 4 years, I was teammates with him, so I raced with him instead of against him. You know, I mean, there weren't nuggets that I would take away from them. I mean, you see the inspiration and the motivation and just the skill set that certain, you know, they're exemplars of the sport. In reality, 90% of the peloton is a domestique, whether you're a super domestique or whatever, whereas 10% are the people who are winning races. So, you know, over time, I felt that I was part of this World Tour community. You learn and pivot and shake and pick up things from your peers, but you know, you do have to no longer purely be looking up to them and just say, yes, I am one of you.
Yeah. Which did you, so you have ridden in Grand Tours, Classics, World Championships. Which did you prefer more, the Grand Tour or the one day all in? And what was the vibe like, the difference in that? I mean, it has to be.
Yeah, they're world apart in terms of experience. I like a 1 week race, a Paris-Nice, a Tour of Swiss.
Why is that?
I think, I mean, more can be shaken out. You have more opportunity to show your cards, as opposed to, you know, what's fascinating about a 1 day race is how much luck is involved, right? I mean, you know, a mistimed mechanical and your race is over, which that stinks. That's also the crazy part about what makes the extraordinary cyclists really stand out. You know, the Wout van Aerts, the Van der Poels right now, the Sagan's, the people who excel at one-day races. It's fascinating because you do need to have so much luck be on your side. So it's a real fun thought experiment to think about the two. There's so much build up to a one-day race. It's also sort of fun to even it out over a handful of days. But I mean, yeah, just real quick, each of them has a very unique experience. A one-day race on the huge side, like a world championship or Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix, they are the Super Bowl, right? I mean, it's fascinating. It's
just the hype from it, like seeing, like when we're us as fans is getting ready, it's like, oh my God. Whereas when it's Grand Tour, it's like, okay, we got this 3 weeks. What day off can I get off of work to watch a whole stage? It's like ones you're like meeting up and drinking a couple beers and we'll see where the night goes. The other one's like, yo, shots right now. Let's get this rolling. And like we're out the gate, like just all in from the gun. So would you say, okay, so 1 week, I wish there was more, like, it's just not very feasible, but for amateurs to experience that. I've only gotten to do Tour of Southland in New Zealand, which was 7 stages, I want to say, but 2 on a day, so 6 days. And it was crazy. It was just like the experience for us when the longest we normally do is like 3 to 4 days. When you get to 5 and 6, you're just wrecked in a different way. And yeah, it's just, I wish there was something more like that. What's the gravel one out? Or Oregon Trail was, I think, 5 days. So that was a cool experience.
Did you do that one?
I did it 2 years ago. Yeah.
Nice.
It was good. It was the grading of gravel is no pun intended, very loose.
Well said.
So yeah, just got to know what you're getting yourself into in terms of equipment and terrain.
I heard that was pretty chunky, pretty darn rough, sharp, jagged, unapologetic gravel.
Some, and then a lot was sand, which unfortunately the bike that I had could only put 36C on the back. So
dude, that's a road bike.
That was not good. And actually, I live in Memphis, Tennessee, just east of it now, in this like little farm town, and there's not many big hills. So we go out to Oregon and there's some crazy descending where I was like, wow, I am way out of my league. And Barry Wicks, I don't know if you know the name, he's a mountain biker. Yeah. So he saw me after the race and we were catching up. He's like, dude, did you do the whole race on that bike? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's frightening. And I'm like, oh, you make me feel way better. He's like, no, seriously, you went down on that. And I was like, yes. He's like, good God, man, I'm glad you're still here. So I was like, well, you make me feel good because descending is not my strong suit. But I was like, holy, how are people going so fast? He's like, okay, well, number one, I'm going to go faster than you anyways because I'm a pro mountain biker. But number two, that is scary as hell. So I was like, okay. And I think there was actually an article that you put that was like, no one's ever complained about having too big of a tire on your bike. So that was
seriously. I mean, the most narrow gravel tire I run is a 38, and in general I run a 42 or 44, and I'd probably even go bigger as more bikes and frames allow it. It's nice to see that the industry is putting the data and science into aerodynamic and drag disadvantages and basically proving that they're not there. So yeah, go wider. It's more comfortable, more fun, more grip, all around better.
Do you I had noticed you made a post about, is it pronounced Rene Hurst?
There's no T and I don't speak French, so however you want to pronounce Herse as a French heirs.
So what's the like knobby situation with you? Are you more like, I guess, do you swap tires often, or are you like, I'm one and gunning with these all summer long?
I am blessed in rubber and carbon. So I have a nice inventory from which to choose. My tire sponsor, Rene Ayres, they basically have 2 tire patterns. One is a total slick and one is a knobby tire. And the knobby tire is, anybody who sees it, it looks chunky, it looks robust, it looks, I mean, check them out. Google RENE HERSE. Its brilliance in the knobby tire, its brilliance comes in its simplicity because it is still rounded. You corner incredibly well. You have great traction going forward because there's always a contact point, which sounds silly and obvious, but it's an incredibly smooth running tire.
Okay.
So it's great on pavement. It's great off-road. And then, yeah, basically I say the shorter answer to your question is, how do I feel about knobbies? I'm actually more and more running slick tires when other people are showing up with knobbies. And then I just run a really wide tire at low pressure, which offers, again, that low rolling resistance, but then better grip, better comfort. And it's a sweet ride. So the only time I'm really ever using a knobby is if I know I'm diving into corners, if I'm doing something that's slick, if there's some mud, if there is wet rocky roots, that sort of thing.
Okay. What are you doing bigger? Are you doing like 28 on the road? Or you 25?
Minimum 32 on the road.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I went to 28 and I feel like I'm driving a Cadillac, but I don't like it. And I went back to 25 and I feel like it corners better. I must be doing
You went
something
back to
wrong.
25 and you went back to 2012.
Yeah, but I'm from the science from the.
It is a proven science that you're not going slower. There's the perception of speed because the wider tires are going to offer a more plush ride, a more comfortable ride. The shorter way of putting it.
But do you feel it corners as well?
No, the corner's 8 to 25 times better because you have a better, wider contact point.
Yeah.
So instead of being on rails and having a really jagged ride, the contact point on a wider tire at lower pressure is wide and short instead of long and narrow.
Yeah.
And long and narrow is what causes more drag. So you're actually going slower on a skinny, pumped up tire.
What type of pressure are you running on the road?
I don't know offhand. 60 to 70.
Okay. Maybe I just have it pumped up too much. I'm like 85, 90.
Yep.
I'm also probably
SRAM. If you Google SRAM tire pressure guide, there's a really great guide that it's not. I mean, basically what it's going to show you. They'll give you as narrow specific recommendations as you want.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the take home point is that we're running our tires too high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it really will. I mean, there's a lot of variables that website takes into consideration. Boom. Wider tires, lower them, have a better ride.
We'll check that out. I know when I first started riding on one of my first teams, a guy had come over from triathlon. He was like, so he was running his tires at 135. And he's like, he did a crit and he was like, something's not right with this bike. So what was it like? So you leave the road scene and I was trying to look back when exactly like you fully jumped into gravel, but you were even talking about in the one, I think it was Velo News article, you're like dirt, like you clearly had your mind towards this gravel thing. What was it like no longer being on a team and kind of doing the privateer thing, and now you're lining up as like Ted King, the former World Tour pro? What was the transition like?
It's goofy and it's interesting and unique and funny and fascinating. So I knew I was going, my final year of racing was 2015, and early in 2015 I knew I was going to retire at the end of that year. So I really enjoyed it and embraced it. We talked about that at the top of the show. Mm-hmm. And it was over that year, in the next few months after I announced my retirement, that some sponsors started coming forward saying like, hey, we like your voice, we like what you represent in the sport, would you like to continue in the sport of cycling? In 2015, the term gravel didn't really exist, especially not in the capacity that it is now. There wasn't an industry behind it. There were a handful of events. They probably called them mixed terrain at the time. And it was early in 2016, my first year of being retired. I did an event in Austin, Texas with SRAM. It was South by Southwest, and met up with Rebecca Rush, who is a name that I knew, but I didn't really know Rebecca at all. And she really took me under her wing. She likes being sort of like a big sister to me and saying, hey, roadie, stop being a dork. Come over to this gravel scene. Come to Dirty KANZA. And so that was really my introduction. Outside of doing something like in Northern California, there's this amazing series called the Grasshopper Adventure Series, which again, that hits that mixed terrain thing, because there's some gravel, some road, some sand, some everything. That's been going on for 22 years, I think. So yeah, you were especially not using the term gravel 22 years ago. You know, I mean, basically that Dirty Kansas 2016, that opened my eyes to it. That was the boom of gravel was going to happen with or without me. My timing was really good. There was no term gravel, really. There was no term privateer. It was, again, back to this just like constant segue as I would define my entire career. So more events popped up, and I have been doing more and more events and having success in them. And it goes back to that, my early days in cycling. Like, more than anything, I like having fun. I like riding my bike. I like being part of this community. I like meeting people and traveling and doing all the fun things that a bike allows you to do. Standing on top of a podium is a blast too. It's not the do all end all. And I think that's really where I hang my hat in the sport right now. I have a 1-year-old daughter, so I sleep not as much as I used to. I joke that my wife likes to ride and compete even more than I do, which may or may not be true, but you know, that's a balance. It's not like, whoop, the King family just shows up and here we are, we're going to do events. There's a ridiculous number of logistics that goes into the traveling circus that is a family going to a bike race.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm tremendously blessed. It's fun to be able to pick and choose the sponsors with whom I work. Instead of, you know, there's very little saying no when you're on a world tour team.
Right.
Here's your bike. Here's your glasses, here's your clothes, here's your race schedule, here's everything you're going to do, which is simple on one hand, and it's not terribly fun. Whereas now it's, yeah, pick and choose your schedule and with whom you work and what do you want to do in this sport. So it's a wild ride.
It is a wild ride. What do you most proud of from, you know, maybe, I don't know, it's a weird question to follow up with after you're like, you know, it's not the be all end all of not only racing or definitely not winning, but are the results that you're most proud of along this journey? Why is that? Maybe say experiences, because maybe it's not the results, you know, but like first Grand Tour, or you know what, I don't want to
right. Yeah. I mean, I'll sort of answer it in two parts. Racing, my first Grand Tour was massive. That was the Giro. I can't believe I finished it. I'd broken my collarbone in February of that year. Came back. That was my first World Tour year, and then came back and just had the most absurd back to back. What did I do? Spring Classics, Ardennes Classics, to Romandy, to Tour of Romandy, to the Giro. Which, you know, you talk to any seasoned pro, and they're like, "Dude, what you just did is silly." I'm like, I was just blindly naive. Okay, that's the schedule they give you.
Send Ted to the race.
Exactly. If he can survive this, he's probably going to be okay. And so, yeah, you know, you watch Grand Tours like you were talking about. Like here in the States, you flip on the computer or TV every fifth stage and you watch something, and then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, they're still racing bikes. Can you believe it? So just getting through that, I think, was a pretty cool accomplishment. The success that I had racing with Peter was awesome. I mean, we were on virtually the same race calendar for 4 years. So that was, it's really cool to work with like once in a generation kind of cyclist. He was just, he's extraordinary.
What makes him so extraordinary?
He's born to ride a bike. I mean, you'd prompted me with sending me some questions earlier, and you listed my teammates: Carlos Sastre, Tor Hushovd, Peter Sagan, and all three are so different. I say Peter is born to ride a bike because his skills are exemplary. Like his power that he can put out is above and beyond. And then I always tell my circus animal story where we're training in the white roads of Italy. We're at a team training camp. We rip through a white road section and get up on the other side, and the team's coming back together after this, call it 5-minute section. Everybody's huffing and puffing as we start going up a hill, and then Peter pulls a wheelie, and he pulls one hand off the bars going up a dirt road, probably 12%, and then he pulls both hands off his bars, so he's doing a no-handed wheelie up a 12% grade at the end of an interval when everybody else is like hardly able to push their bike forward. It's just a league of their own, right? He's different. Whereas now we're going in a tangent, but I introduced this
tangents are great. Tangents are great.
Tor was, you know, he's big machismo, Norwegian, just great guy, really fun, dynamic, sort of the proud sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
And Carlos Sastre he was very reserved. He was quiet. He was a family guy. I think he was quite a bit more analytical, and you know, he had to be tactful in the way that he was racing. And so it was interesting working with and being on teams with all three of those guys. So there's that diversion complete. What was the original question?
No, dude, that's great. This is actually, I need to start calling this like cycling tangents. Stephen Bassett was on here. And he's like, dude, do you mind if I go on a tangent? And I was like, please do. He went off talking about like, he has, I can't remember if it's he has Japanese ancestry in his family somewhere. And so he's talking about dojos and stuff. And he's like building his dojo in Europe. And I'm like, dude, this is incredible. We need these tangents.
That's awesome.
What's driving you? It seems like you're big on this whole journey thing. You know, there's not just one piece of cycling that has made you Ted King today. You have a family, which is an incredible responsibility and joy that is off the bike, but your wife's involved in the bike. Like, what do you see as, how are bikes still pushing this forward? Do you just love to ride or is it, you're like, hey, this is my kind of my career now and it works with my family, or maybe you're like, dude, I need to go rip up all these gravel events and let people know who's still boss. And I'd love if your ego showed through and you're like, dude, I just want to crush people.
All right, everybody, that's the episode for today. We will be back with part 2 with Ted King very soon. Thanks again for checking this one out. And if you found it beneficial or helpful or just inspired you a little bit, got something positive from it, please tell a friend about what we're doing and shoot Ted a message and tell him thanks for his time. We greatly appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.